I don't know when, but I guarantee you, I know that this thing's going to $1 million a coin.
Is it going to stop at $1 million?
No, that's the thing. That's a good point. You know what? You can get out to like 30 years. I think it's like $240 million. So it's incredible. You saw people were, including Saylor, were discussing $100 trillion market cap. I believe that's realistic. I do believe that's realistic. I tell people if you can get to 1/10 of a Bitcoin and you're young, I mean, you're going to water people's eyes as the world unfolds around you. And I'll tell you the reason why is because we got a limited amount of time here. We're not going to be able to, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's not a lot of coins left here, bud. And you've only got about 8 years now, maybe 9 years, and you're going to be at the 99% point. If you've ever calculated where your wealth is going to be here in another 10 to 20 to 30 years, it's incredible. I mean, it would water your eyes. Gold's market cap's about 18 trillion, right? Actually, it's a little bit higher. So if we overtake gold, it'll be a million a coin. And what's going to stop there? And remember, inflows into market cap, they have a multiple effect. It's probably about 4 to 6, somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe 5 is a good number. Just use 5. It's not going to take another, $16 trillion for us to overtake gold. Not at all. It's going to take a lot less. And it's going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable.
Yo, George, what's up? Absolutely crazy day with the White House summit. There's been some news that's been coming out of it. Trump is saying, don't sell your Bitcoins. He's saying he's thinking about getting rid of capital gains. He's saying that the U.S. government is looking at alternatives in order to acquire more. I mean, and not to mention the fact that this reserve is specifically a Bitcoin reserve, and he's siloing the altcoins, the crypto industry aside. He freed Ross, ended Operation Chokepoint 2.0. I mean, he delivered. He really, really delivered. I know you brought champagne to celebrate today. I've been celebrating as well. Big victory for Bitcoiners. The idea that Bitcoin's going to be banned, that's over. It's done. George, welcome to the show. Happy to have you.
Thanks, partner. I'll tell you something. I'm really excited. In fact, I'd have to say, I don't understand why the rest of X is not as excited as I am. I've got a beautiful tin ceiling in this studio. You can't really see it, but it's from it's a pattern from the late 1800s. I built this studio pretty much myself by hand, and I'm going to put a dent, if I can, right now in that ceiling. That's awesome, buddy. Yeah, I'm going to pour myself a glass of the bubbly because you know what? Unlike other people, I'm excited as hell today. I think this is one of the best damn days. I have seen more great things happening over the last 12 months. And, these people that are not excited this evening, they got their head up their ass, and it's time to pull it out of it and, start to enjoy this day. And here's a sip, a toast, my friend.
Cheers, George. Cheers. Yes, I'm joining you in celebration. I don't have champagne on me, but I am equally ecstatic. This is a historic day. I think, what I got essentially from most people is like, Nico, fine, it's historic, this and that, but the price, man, it's dumping, it's to sell the news. So could you break down the significance of what happened today, George? And for anyone who's listening to the podcast, it's obviously going to release like a week later. So essentially today, Trump hosted the White House summit. He had all the biggest leaders in the Bitcoin and crypto industry. And of course, the strategic Bitcoin reserve has gone live. Trump beat the state of Texas. I think he really wanted to be first. That's Trump's personality. That's the way he rolls. So, George, what is the significance of this? Why are you popping champagne?
Well, look, why don't we just zoom out for a minute and take a look at what we really wanted as Bitcoiners here. I was very skeptical about this whole process, even all the way back into Nashville and stuff. I was really skeptical, but I thought the speeches there, that was a moment where we crossed the Rubicon. I mean, this is a new world that we're living in now, and we're not going to go back. You're not going to push the, toothpaste back into the tube here. And this just solidifies, we were very upset. The initial executive order that came out within like 36 hours, it was not what I wanted to see because it didn't establish a Bitcoin reserve. And Nonetheless, I'm not going to say that I was disappointed in some of the other parts of it. It's the idea of self-custody, the ability to, transact. It gave us a lot of rights in paper. And of course, this is not an actual bill as 4912 is from the Bitcoin Act with Senator Lummis. But this is, I thought that was a great start. He freed Ross. I was pumped. I wasn't, the only thing I said, again, I was just disappointed about one thing. And guess what? There's nothing to be disappointed now, is there? I mean, think about it. I mean, just think about what we're talking about here, kids. I mean, you're looking at a digital Fort Knox. Bitcoin Fort Knox is what we just established. And it's a Bitcoin only, no shitcoins in there. I bet there's a lot of pissed off people right now in Washington. Garlinghouse is probably like, he is not having a great day right now. And I love that. The fact that they separated those two and, they established a digital asset stockpile. I call it a digital asset shit pile. I mean, it's got, what's in there right now that they can transfer into there off of the holdings that are seized right now. I think it's like ETH, poor ETH. And then it's Bitcoin Cash of all things and Litecoin. I don't even think they got XRP in their holdings. So that Garlinghouse not having a really nice day today. And, you mentioned the summit. I was just taking a couple of pictures here while we were fooling around here, just looking at my phone there on X and the meeting. You've got sailors sitting in there, just some of the great Bitcoiners are in there. And Vicent's on one side. And of course, Howard Lutnick, who is basically, he's a Bitcoin bull. He's almost as much of a bull as I am. I mean, I'm like a Bitcoin perma bull. I've got, I'm cast in iron and I've got gonads the size of church bells. And he's probably one of the few people, he just disclosed he's got hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin. He just said that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and it's going to billions. So he's told us already. And then, just think about it. They acknowledge the fact, and this is the president of the United States speaking. They acknowledge there's only 21 million Bitcoin. I mean, think about that. The next time your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving stands up there and says, well, they can make as many as they want, you can just tell him, no, that's not true. Presidents even said it. It's never been hacked. They even acknowledged that. You remember, they said that's in the executive order. I've read it. No Bitcoin can be sold. That's another big thing. We're talking about digital Fort Knox. This is an asset that we hold like gold. Budget neutral. And that's an important part too. Some people were kind of pissy about that and I don't understand it. It makes sense. What do you want to do? Imagine that we're going to start buying Bitcoin immediately instead of taking seized Bitcoins. You know what? You're going to piss off a lot of taxpayers. You'll be at that Thanksgiving table and they'll be looking at you and going, I'm not happy right now. And so we bypass that. That's a really big deal. And, budget neutral gives them a lot of play here. I mean, I did some research on it today. I mean, there are so many different things that both the Treasury Department can do and the Commerce Department. I mean, it's just incredible. And the other thing is, we don't even know how many damn Bitcoin we got right now. And this actually establishes an audit. In fact, they've got 30 days on this executive order to get the damn audit together and then transfer. That's the other thing. We're going to start transferring. So, and it's so shocking to me to think, and price, I mean, what, if you're worried about the price when it's up at $80,000-$90,000 a coin, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, again, just look around for a minute where we are, and I'm going to take another sip.
Yeah, man, it's so much different, so many emotions, especially if you've been here a while, right? And you just kind of seen the steps happen in slow motion. This is my 9th year in Bitcoin, almost a third of my life. It's been a very long time, roller coaster ride. Our industry went from essentially a black market to being attacked to essentially now the United States government, the most powerful government on the face of the planet, is essentially giving it a rubber stamp of approval, which is so significant. I don't think people understand. People haven't comprehended what this means. But I think anyone who's paying attention, and if you understand it from the historical context, you understand that the world is never going to be the same. Now nation state adoption is going to accelerate from here. China and Russia are going to look at the US and they're going to say, hey, we need some too. There's only 21 million. I mean, it's not rocket science. And then another thing I'll say is like last time the price of Bitcoin was at 109,000, there was no strategic Bitcoin reserve. Like Trump was just getting inaugurated. So essentially you have a 20% discount with better information, and it's public. That's the way I'm looking at it. At the time of recording, it's 86,000. Next week, I don't know if it's going to be 86,000. When this episode gets released, maybe I'll have like a very big "I told you so," or But let me ask you something, George. Like, why do you think the price isn't pumping? Because I think a lot of people did expect Bitcoin to be a lot higher at the moment, and it's not.
Well, I do a lot of people that follow me know that I do a lot of on-chain. I follow on-chain metrics a lot. James Check is probably my main source there, Checkmatey on X. And, I look at different models and stuff. And quite frankly, I mean, I'm not surprised in the sense that most people don't know this, but from that run up that we did up to about 58K, you remember we were bouncing down in there when we went up to like 73 and then we paused again, and then we went continuing all the way up there. Throughout every one of those little segments there, we were selling coins from long-term holders just left and right. I mean, we ended up over that entire period selling about 1.1 million coins from long-term holders, people that should, maybe know better. Actually, that's not necessarily true because if you look at something called SOPR and you look at what kind of actual value is being realized either in profit or loss, these are people that have sold, they might have purchased like 58, 73, somewhere in there, and they're selling on the way up. And then the other thing is when you get down into this area that we're at right now, kind of retesting an area where there wasn't a lot of price discovery going on either side of that, those numbers. So I'm not a bit surprised. And I mean, frankly, I just don't care. I mean, when I think about Bitcoin and where it's going, I mean, this just is meaningless to me. I figure that, people just have a very limited amount of time to get this right. I mean, you're not going to see this continue much longer. My call sign in the Navy when I was a fighter pilot, it was Jethro. After that old Beverly Hillbillies character, he's kind of stupid. And that fits me sometimes. He didn't do good with math, but I can tell you something. I'm a little better than him with math. And if you look at the numbers, if you look at the coins that are either not for sale or gone or whatever, I mean, just think about it for a minute. You're looking at Satoshi's coins that's 1.1 million. If they continue with the Bitcoin Act and it passes, that's going to be 1 million coins off the market, 450 a day over the next 5 years. You look at Saylor, Bernstein, and a couple other places now have already mentioned that they think he's going to get up to 1 million coin, and I believe it. I think that he's going to take 1 million coins off the market. And then you look at the just like 2 months ago, you could look online, you could see that the top 71 nations and corporations held about 3 million coins, and they're not going to be moving around very much. Then you look at the lost coins, and I've seen everything from 2 to 4 million. River just came out with a report that kind of, I'm not sure if it's accurate or not, but I guess what I'm trying to say is there's not a lot of coins left here, bud. And you've only got about 8 years now, maybe 9 years, and you're going to be at the 99% point. And after that, everything we mine just by, basic math in the past history, everything we mine, we're losing about the same every day. So you're basically going to be capped right there. And, you mentioned nation states. I mean, God almighty, just think about where we're going with this. In Nashville, David Bailey, if you're listening out there, buddy, I probably owe you an apology because I really was not a big fan of what was going on down there in Nashville. And, but, I get a lot of things wrong in life. I mean, and that's probably one of them. And, this obviously has been a very positive thing for Bitcoin going forward. There'll be maxis out there that are kind of like throwing poop emojis on me right now. But nonetheless, these ETFs, and I think where we're going right now as far as for adoption, I mean, these are really positive developments. I'm not sure how you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I totally agree. It's I kind of had, it doesn't surprise me that this has happened. I think I had a little bit of insight into what was happening on the political level in terms of the original executive order. And essentially my sources in DC were telling me that the Ripple lobby was very, very strongly against the Bitcoin only reserve. And I knew that, and I was getting messages and calls and all that stuff. So when it released, the fact that it didn't mention a specific currency told me that Trump was under enormous political pressure. And then I think when he truth socialed the post, like saying like Cardano, XRP, like, and then he followed up with like a repost of the post, and it basically said something along the lines of like, oh, of course BTC is going to be included in ETH, and then today we find out essentially that it's going to be Bitcoin only. That is the art of the deal 101. Like, if you followed Trump's diplomacy, that is literally Trump 101. That's what he does, right? And it's like kind of misdirection, like advocating for, and at the end of the day, he gets exactly what he wants, and he does it exactly perfectly. And Trump's been doing that for years now. So I had a little bit of insight into what was going on in the background. I didn't know he was going to be this on point in terms of it being Bitcoin only. I knew it was going to be the majority Bitcoin, but I didn't think it was going to be secluded from the altcoin reserve. And then specifically, if you read the executive order, it says the United States intends to acquire more Bitcoin, but it doesn't intend to acquire alternative digital assets. So, and then the way that he gets all the other crypto executives to show up at the summit, even though he's not buying their token, is just, again, it's Trump 101. Like, if you've been following American politics for the last decade and really seeing how Trump operates, none of this should surprise you. And I think another thing that I'll say too, George, is like, I think Bitcoiners had their first kind of like foray into politics. I've been following politics for a long time, and I'm a junkie. I watch the War Room like I used to watch it like daily. So I love how it works, and I have a pretty good idea of just like the dynamics of it and whatever. But Bitcoin was always separate. But it wasn't until the Biden administration kind of stepped in and really started messing with us that it kind of forced our hand a little bit to get involved, and it also created an opportunity for the Republicans and Trump to kind of capitalize on and say, hey, you know what? If you vote for me, I'll get off your back, right? So it was like, if Biden didn't attack Bitcoin, I don't think any of this would have happened, which is the crazy part. So it's like they caused all of this, or maybe you can make an argument they didn't cause it, but they definitely expedited the inevitable, right? So pretty crazy world that we're living in. Anyways, I want to talk about you because you came out of nowhere. I saw your Twitter bio. You're wearing a Top Gun hat. Apparently you're a Navy fighter pilot. Does that mean that you landed on aircraft carriers?
Yes, I have scared the living shit out of myself. And yeah, I mean, I'll tell you something. Landing on board the carrier is, it's kind of fun at first until you see that it's actually very dangerous, and you start to see people get hurt or something, and then it kind of changes. And by the time I left the Navy, I mean, landing on board at night on the carrier was it. Sometimes there were moments when I could have. I was so puckered up, I could have sucked up the seat cushion in the F-18 up my butt. I mean, I was definitely puckered. But you know what? I really enjoyed my time in the Navy. It really helped me a lot. I was kind of one of those kids. I was really untethered. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And I've had a million jobs. I'm an ex-cop, ex-miner. I used to work in the oil fields, and my life, it just kind of seemed like it was going nowhere. And actually, I didn't even get through high school. And I went to college and then dropped out of college. And so, and finally, I remember one time I was deep underground, and it just seemed like my life was just a mess, man, not going anywhere. And I went back to school and I got a degree. And the next thing you know, I mean, the Navy needed pilots, and I had pilot experience when I was a kid and was 17 years old. I used to fly planes around the country for like a used car dealer. And so I got in and went through a program. If you ever watch Full Metal Jacket, I got to meet one of those Marine DIs up real close and personal one morning. And they turned me into an officer and a gentleman. And then, yeah, I flew in the Navy and ended up going through Top Gun. And uh, it was really cool. I flew F-18s, which they used in the last movie, which was pretty neat too. And then I flew for Delta and basically had a great career with them too. I unfortunately had a bad accident, and I've mentioned this before, in a brain injury, traumatic brain injury. If there are any vets out there that are listening to this, I really feel for you. I understand what it's like to have that kind of an injury now, and I never knew it before. And it's a really difficult period, but I got through it, just kept pushing forward. And next thing you know, found Bitcoin. And, I'm retired now. I'm just living a great life, got all my wealth in Bitcoin. And the reason I just started doing these podcasts because I'm good friends with Larry Lepard and Bob Burnett, and they kind of talked to me and they said, you got a story, you should get out there and try to help people. Because I remember what I said earlier. I mean, I'm telling you, Nico, we got a limited amount of time here. We're not going to be able to stack stats where we've been stacking, and you've been in this longer than I have, so you know the same thing. I mean, some of these prices that we saw, they're gone forever. We're not going to go down to 17, 16,000 and let me buy some more Bitcoin down there. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and appreciate you sharing all that. And seems like you've had a very interesting and fulfilling career. And I can't imagine all the the experiences and the stories. And America was at war. Really, like the last 50, 60 years, there was some type of conflict happening around the world, right?
Yeah, isn't it
Um,
sad?
so, and of course, and you identify the root cause, it's money printing. But, what was it about your career, right? So the Navy, you flew commercial, you had an injury. What was it about your career in the Navy, being essentially a pilot, that initially attracted you to Bitcoin?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess, you know what, really, when you think about it, I mean, I was just trying to escape. If you think about what happened after 2008, the great financial crisis, I mean, anybody that, was looking around thought, hey, this is a changed world we live in now. When Bernanke started the QE program in 2010, you could see the handwriting on the wall. In fact, I wasn't alone. Look at China. At the time of the great financial crisis, China had 1.2 over that trillion dollars of U.S. treasuries. And then within just a short period of time after the GFC, and when they realized that they were going to start printing forever, they started selling them off. They're down to about 760, I think, right now. They're a little bit less than Japan. And the reason that's important, and I mentioned that to Bitcoiners, is because if you look around and you looked and you thought, gee, I got to get out of this system. I got to do something to protect myself. There really wasn't that much you could do. I mean, they were blowing an asset bubble. So if you were smart, you did, you put your wealth into asset bubbles and let it rip. And many boomers did that. But, this is a different world that we're in today. That's not going to happen going forward. You mentioned about conflicts and war, and this is probably my biggest hope. This is one of the reasons I got so excited about Bitcoin, is because I'm hoping that Bitcoin is going to be what stops this nonsense. We were in Afghanistan for 20 fucking years. And you know what? That's like 5 times as long as we were in World War II, a world conflict where we defeated, many powers, and it took 4 years. And now we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. If you look at the amount of money that we spent between Afghanistan and Iraq, it comes out to about $4 to $6 trillion.
Crazy.
Why could we do that? How can you fight a war for 20 some odd years? How can you spend $6 trillion? You can only do it one way. You can just print money. That's it. That's how you do it. If you look back on the past history of our country and other countries, you see that every time they get in a situation where they need to have a conflict, it's always printing money. So my goal, my hope was that Bitcoin would provide a way out. Once I began to study Bitcoin, and I didn't get it right away. You probably are smarter than I am. I got it, and I was trading shitcoins, and I bought some Bitcoin. It went way up, and I sold it like an idiot. And but I when you realize that you don't understand what you hold, the best thing to do is just get right back in the books. Just get in the books and start studying and reading and understanding, watching podcasts like this. And I did that. Once I understood it, once I really got it, I just started going back in and bigger and bigger. You know how that is. You start small. Next thing you know, you've got more and more of your wealth in there. And then today, sitting here today, I mean, I've got all my wealth in Bitcoin or a proxy. I've got some MicroStrategy stock too, but basically, everything I have is in Bitcoin. And I'm pretty damn happy too, I'll tell you.
Yo, I want to tell you about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack. I'm talking about bitcoinwell.com. What makes bitcoinwell.com different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. And that perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Support Bitcoin on-ramps that are self-custody by default. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com today. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin.
It's interesting. And, to add to your point, George, like, I think most people that I've met, they start with altcoins and then they get their fingers burned metaphorically. And then they're like, oh, Bitcoin, Bitcoin only. And then they just, then they kind of understand and then they make the transition. Very rarely have I ever met someone that has just gone Bitcoin only from the beginning. So most people are like that. I put myself in that category too. I got into the industry via mining, so I always had an understanding of the infrastructure behind the Bitcoin network, and I knew that it was very unique in that sense, compared to like Ethereum. Ethereum migrated away from proof of work. So, but even when it was proof of work, if you compared the hash rate between Ethereum and Bitcoin, Ethereum never even came close. So the amount of computational power backing up the Bitcoin network really made it stand out. And then there was the fork wars that happened, where Jihan and Roger kind of teamed up, and then they artificially made the Bitcoin Cash hash rate like surpass Bitcoin's twice. And then you're like, wait a second, like, is this Bitcoin Cash really thing? Is it really taking Bitcoin? Because as a miner, you're looking at that, you're like, wait a second. And then it wasn't only until after the fact that you were like, oh, that was artificial. They were literally setting money on fire in order to happen, or in order for that to happen. It wasn't actually market dynamics. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Now, okay, so you had a long career, like I was saying earlier. You got attracted to Bitcoin. You found Bitcoin. You started with altcoins. What was it about the Navy? What was it about your experiences, like that led you to the realization that money printing was funding everything? Because as obvious as that seems to us, that isn't something obvious to most people. Most people still think that inflation is caused by the weather and supply chains and et cetera, et cetera. They have no idea that the government is the sole cause. So what really made you have that aha moment that you just opened your eyes?
When you think about how people come to Bitcoin, it's usually that kind of a story where you start to dabble in it and then you get involved in it. And I'm sure that when you were first into Bitcoin, you didn't have the resources that I did to orange pill myself. And when I first got into Bitcoin, it was pretty much a number go up type of, something I was looking for to either preserve wealth, maybe create wealth. But the more and more I became involved in it, I'd have to say when I got out of the Navy, I didn't know any of this stuff we're talking about right now. None. When I got hired by Delta, I was clueless. And, it really was not until 2008. It's not really until that period where I was forced almost to look outside because, I was just the standard boomer. you got a 401k and you just maybe do an index fund or anything, something like that. But you know what? That doesn't really protect your wealth. You don't understand how much you are being debased and how they are pulling the rug from under you until you really start to study. I've read so many great books that discuss this. I mean, from, Jekyll Island to right now I'm finishing up Lords of Easy Money. That's an incredible story about how QE changed our country forever. So, maybe I could attribute to Lynn Alden. I definitely could give her a shout out because I will tell you one thing. I saw Bitcoin in 2012. I thought it was stupid as hell. And she wrote an article in 2017. Same thing, I could tell I wasn't ready to get in right then. And I don't think she did either. But, when she came out in, I think it was like January, February of 2020 with the follow-up article, that changed me, that article. I will say that might be the moment because I read that article and I thought, this gal, I follow Lynn and I subscribe to her newsletter. And you know what? This gal's smart. I consider myself like an 80 IQ pleb. And I mean that. I'm a working stiff. My whole life I've been just working my ass off. And, you know, um, to see somebody like that who's very intelligent and has really done the work, and I read her article probably several times, and I thought, you know what, this gal, she knows what she's talking about. And then I started following her. I just kept reading more and more. That's when I started really accumulating on a more serious note, trying to stack. And today, I just cannot tell people. I wish I could somehow explain to you two things. One, that you have a limited time left, guys, that this train is going to leave the station. I know it. You know, yeah, when you think of all the things that you and I have discussed, and including what's happened over the last 14 months, this path in front of us is clear. And Bitcoin has so many characteristics that are similar to, well, if I were to say something to you, and I know I'm getting a little off topic, but there's not a moment that I got orange pilled as much as just a few certain incidents that just kind of pushed me in that direction. And I'll just say Lynn was one. But before I stop, I want to mention something. I'm a big fan. I follow the power law a lot. And, you had a great interview with Giovanni because you're kind of like me. You're not a math guy. And that was a funny interview because I was feeling the same way, while you were talking to him and stuff. And but nonetheless, there's some really solid math behind that power law. And if you look at power laws, Bitcoin.
Oh, wait, hold on. You verified the power law thing because Giovanni's talking, right? And if you saw that interview, Giovanni's talking, and I'm like, and he's like, he's a good guy, he's a funny guy, and he's like saying he's like everything follows the power law, and then I'm a media guy, right? You want to talk to me about media and getting views and whatever, it's like the back of my hand, I understand it. But he's talking about this, everyone follows the power law. And I'm like, oh, you sure? So there's this thing that could perfectly predict the price of Bitcoin. I've heard this a million times, right? But so far it's followed it until it doesn't. So far it has, but I think every model eventually breaks, in my opinion. But it's funny that you saw that episode. So, okay, I rudely interrupted you. You saw the power law thing. So you verified the math. What math did you verify? How did you verify it?
All right. So now look, I'm a fan of different models. I follow 21st Capital, Cena. I follow this particular one. I follow Rational Root a lot. And, I just follow these people. And obviously, the person that gives me my grounding is James Check with his analysis. But the thing about the power law is the more you study it and you start to read about power laws, you realize that this power law to Bitcoin is not unique. There are so many things in the world that actually do follow power laws. And what I was going to say before is that if you look at Bitcoin, you look at the power law, and you look at viruses, okay, there is one thing that is really fundamental to all three. And what the power law is actually describing, and that is network effects. It's a network. Even a virus is. In fact, power laws can describe viruses and their propagation really well. And Darren Acemoglu, sorry, Darren, I probably pronounced that like crap. But anyway, He gave a lecture at MIT in 2009 on power laws and very clearly delineated them to networks. And what is Bitcoin? Let me ask you this, because I know my answer. Have you ever used a term to describe Bitcoin as like a living beast or something that's alive?
Yes. And if you want, I could explain my logic behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I believe it's alive is because essentially Bitcoin has co-opted human greed in order to ensure its survival. And it's a self-sustaining network. Like essentially it incentivizes human beings in order to keep it alive. And you could make an argument that is like at least very, very basic level intelligence. Even though I don't think it was designed with that intention and whatnot, but design is one thing, but the behavioral outcome is another thing. So I 100% believe that you can use the term "it is alive" because it is acting like something that is alive, which is like trying to survive. So that's my logic behind it. But the way that I see it is like the way I've described it to people is like you can really describe Bitcoin as one of the first kind of artificial intelligent networks. Very basic, rudimentary, but it's still kicking. I'll give you an example. So when the Chinese Communist Party banned Bitcoin mining, hash rate dropped 50%. It cut the last bull market short. And within 9 months, the hash rate recovered, the price recovered, and now the hash rate is making record highs. There was no central authority or program in Bitcoin that was like, hey guys, you got to plug in those miners. It was like the incentive created enough motivation for entrepreneurs to plug in the machines because they realized they were going to make that much more money. And then they just kind of like plugged in. So again, it's like Bitcoin has co-opted human greed in order to ensure its survival, to the point that now you can make an argument that Bitcoin has co-opted the US government, right? It's not like the US government is doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing this out of greed because numbers go up, right? Same reason BlackRock is doing it, same reason Sailor is doing it, same reason a lot of us are doing it. I mean, what's the saying? You came for the money, you stayed for the revolution, right? So yeah, very long answer to your question, but yes, I 100% believe it's alive in a specific way. Yes.
Well, okay, so just imagine if normies were looking down on you and me talking about this right now, okay, sheeple. They would think that you and I were crazy to think that a protocol had some kind of lifelike characteristics. But I've done the same thing. My favorite category is I just call it like the apex predator because I think it just eats everything. I was listening and I mentioned this to somebody yesterday. I think, I was listening to Jeff Parks and, that guy's a pretty cerebral thinker. I mean, he is like a technical analyst. And, he said the same thing. He called it alive. Guess what Michael Saylor said, like on TV? It was like probably less than a week ago, and he called it a virus. And the reason I say this is because, in fact, if you look at a virus is not alive. Just like you said a minute ago, a virus is not alive, but it's not dead. It's somewhere in between. It's a weird thing. And how does it finds a host? And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that in my mind, Bitcoin has a host, and that host is the internet. And when you think about it, the host has already been built out. It's there. It's waiting to be infected. And here's the other thing. Bitcoin has picked a host that can't be stopped. You cannot stop the internet unless you stop the world. And you can't stop it just from one country. Imagine China. You've already mentioned China. Imagine them turning off the internet for 3 days. Imagine any country doing that. And guess what? Bitcoin doesn't give a shit because it doesn't matter. Today's world, you can shut off the internet in one of these countries. As soon as it comes back online, the nodes are going to sync. They're going to get booted back up. They're going to get the longest chain, and we're right back to the races, just as you mentioned as far as moving out hash rate. It's resilient because it picked a host that can't be killed, and it's using that host. Right now, you've got about almost 5 billion people that are connected to the internet. You've got almost 4 billion on a smartphone. So this isn't going to stop. And if it's a network, the thing is, and if you look at how a network propagates, you and I, we're familiar with Metcalfe's law. But the thing is that you can actually look at the growth rate of that network and you can figure out where Bitcoin is going to go. That's why the power law works. Now, let's just get back for a minute before I sound like I'm a nut. I don't know if this is going to work anymore in the future. I mean, the power law kind of makes an assumption that there's a time decadence. It's like a leveling off. It's not an exponential growth. And if we have some major events come forward over the next year or two, I mean, you could see that power law break. You know, in fact, if you look at all the people that I follow that are talking about models and price and everything like that, think about what we're talking about. You've been in the space long enough to know about volatility. We are basing our assumptions on one of the most volatile products that anybody has ever brought to a market. And it's very short lifespan and it's nascent. It's taking over the world right now. And it's young. It's like it's born. You know, we're going to look back in 10 or 20 years. And for you, I'm telling you, Nico, I don't know if you've ever looked at, if you've ever calculated where your wealth is going to be here in another 10 to 20 to 30 years. It's incredible. I mean, it would water your eyes. And if you're young out there, if you're not an old fart like me and, you got a long horizon in front of you and you can see it, it might look like it's flat. And by the way, I've been up high enough to know that the earth is not flat. But if you're looking out there on a wide horizon, you look out there, if you're younger than 45 years old or something, your future on the Bitcoin standard is going to be something that you cannot imagine. We are going to create the greatest transfer of wealth over the next 20 years that this world's ever seen. And it's going to go to good people. I mean, when you think about Bitcoiners, we're not flat earthers. Again, we're not Luddites. We're people that are moral and ethical, and we think, we read, we study. We have, great hopes for our world here. And those are the people that are going to inherit the earth. And, you've got kids and, it's going to be a better world because we're going to get out of that endless war. We're going to stop doing that kind of nonsense and get things more aligned to where they should be when we're on sound money, hard money, like Bitcoin.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledin has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally have not only an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledin is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to hodl while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you. Check out ledin.io today.
Do you want to talk about that aspect? Because I think I have an understanding of, because you can obviously break down the exponentials, but like, could you break down what you're seeing in 10, 20, 30 years horizon in Bitcoin terms? Because I think it's very difficult to understand. And something that I think I've learned over this time that I've been in the industry is like, yeah, one day in Bitcoin feels like 100 days. Cause it's a emotional and spiritual journey hodling. Seeing your net worth, I think, go up and down, and then you're learning about money along the way, right? Cause you're obviously asking questions like, what is it that I'm holding? And then that leads you down the rabbit hole of like, oh my God, what is money? And then where I'm at right now is the question isn't what is money? The question is what is government? Which is a very, very deep question. But to go back to your point, and it really like opened my eyes, is what should people expect? Like, what do you mean? Like, if you're under the age of 45, like, what is this? What is this? What are you expecting? What do you see that we don't see?
There's a couple of things I want to get out to people here, and there's two things that are important in this discussion. Albert Einstein supposedly said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. I don't think he really said that, but if you can find it, if anybody's listening, you can find it. You DM me on X, and I'll be eternally grateful. So he should have said it, because it would have been correct. And it's difficult for people to get their heads around that and to understand what I'm talking about. And then the other thing is, secondly, Bitcoin has got the highest cumulative annual growth rate, called CAGR, of any asset that I can think of. It's greater than any commodity. It's greater than any equity. It's greater than anything. And the third part of this equation is time. And that's as critical as anything in this equation. I can give you, I'll tell you what, if you want to get a clickbait thing, I can give you a number here, because, Bitcoin's CAGR over the last 5 years has been about 55% or something. You put that thing in there and you let that, if you ever go, and if you're listening to this, you can just go on to Google or Chat GPT or Grok, type in reverse CAGR calculator, and you'll have 3 fields to fill in. You put in your own CAGR, whatever you think Bitcoin's going to return, and I can give you some feedback on that in just a second. I will, in fact, to help you out. And then put in, I don't know, pick out whatever you got. If you got some Bitcoin now, put that number in. If you got half a Bitcoin, stick that thing in. I tell people, if you can get to a tenth of a Bitcoin and you're young, I mean, you're going to water people's eyes as the world unfolds around you. And I'll tell you the reason why is because, you can put in 40% right now, okay? And you can look out to 20 years and it comes out to about, I don't know, 8-point-some million dollars. But you know what? If you go for just a little bit longer, it just jumps so fast. And what's weird is you can go down to 10 years, that same amount of CAGR, that 40% a year, and it's not much. You look at it and you go, well, that's interesting. I can't really retire on that. I can't live on it. By the time it gets to a year, you better stand by, or to 20 years, you better stand by. And if you let it go, you use it. Go and use that CAGR calculator. You can get out to like 30 years. I think it's like $240 million. So it's incredible. But I can give you some feedback here, because I just listened to Mazinski with Preston Pish here, and he gave me some data that I really wasn't aware of. And he's a fan of the power law also. And I think he might have probably been like the second person to really discuss or publish it. Guy's really sharp. He's probably an expert in M2 and money supply across the planet. And he just said that his calculations show that it's about been 45%, and it's going to continue 45 for a little while. Then it's probably going to go down to 30, 35%. What's really weird is that his figures show it going out, decreasing to like 10, I think it was 10 or 20%, and it would take 100 years, even 150 years to get down to 10%. So this is going to be, I know, it's going to be very, very slow, this CAGR. It's going to stay up there higher than anything you can imagine. Now, if you use Sailor's 20%, that's another figure there. And I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I'm just telling you, you can do it yourself. What I did is I figure, just put in, 35% for the next 5 years. Put in, I think I used 30% for the next 10, and then 25%. And for our lifetimes, you'll probably stay up in that regime. You'll probably be 25, maybe down to 20%. Just put those numbers in and you'll see what I'm talking about. Your future is assured. In fact, what you need to do right now is you need to start thinking about how you're going to transfer that wealth to the people you love and build a world for them. Because that's another discussion, and that's something every Bitcoiner is going to have to come to grips with.
Yeah, 100%. And the CAGR numbers are fascinating, right? So is it going to stick with the 55%? I don't think so. I think that as the market cap gets bigger, it's obviously going to decrease. But I think Saylor's predicted numbers were, at least for the next 15 years, 60 to 40%. And then after 15 years, it will start to dwindle down to 20%. But for people to get a perspective, like even on the best year in the S&P, you're very happy if you get an 8 to 12% return, right?
Exactly.
So just by having your wealth in Bitcoin, you get a 20% return. And that's essentially that's almost double of what you're getting in S&P. But from the exponential growth aspect, it might not be significant on a 1-year time scale, but if you layer that out over 10 years, double your return over 10 years is like, it's ridiculous. It's like, it's a night and day. It's like, it's a big difference between a 10% return, a 20% return, and a 30% return, especially the more time goes by, because it starts to compound on top of each other and it gets ridiculous. And yeah, compound calculators are really fun to use, especially if you put in like a 20-year time frame. It gets crazy. It gets nuts. And there was I forget what show this is from, but essentially big YouTuber, big fan of his content. And he's like, look, if you start saving $500 a month and you start doing it at 18 years old, by the time you're 60, you'll be a multimillionaire. If you use the compound interest stuff, it's a time thing. It's like one of the reasons why I think Warren Buffett got so wealthy, right? Is I think he fundamentally understood the power of compound interest. And I think Bitcoin is one of the most powerful things for compound interest. Now, I think one of the questions for you, George, and I think this is a question that I think a lot of people have on their minds is, wait a second. So Bitcoin is already at $86,000. Am I late to the party? Like, have I missed the boat? I can't even, like, most people are not going to be able to buy one Bitcoin. Like, especially if you're young, if you're just getting your life started, you're getting your career started, you don't have $86,000, right? So you're looking at that, you're like, that's unattainable. What would you say to them?
I'm so glad you brought that up, man. That is such an important point. I mean, that is, you know what? I'll tell you something. That is like been the overriding theme of this particular rally is I'm too late. I'm late to Bitcoin. I need to somehow teleport myself where I'm holding big bags. And, people are doing crazy things to get there. The meme coins, what? I think, what do? We produced 2 million meme coins in like a month or something. I mean, it was ridiculous. So people are doing everything they can to try and pump themselves up to a point where they can acquire Bitcoin and then rest. And I have seen this over and over again, and it doesn't work. That's not how Bitcoin works. Bitcoin, it takes work. You got to work your ass off. I mean, you don't teleport yourself into Bitcoin. And for people that think they're late, I'm not saying that Bitcoin couldn't drop down to 70,000 tomorrow. It could. I'd be surprised, especially where we are right now and the data that I'm looking at. If it ever got down to like 65,000, I don't have any money left, okay? I mean, I'm all in Bitcoin, but I'd find something. I'd do something to get some more money to try and buy Bitcoin at that price point. And when it crashed down to 16.8 or something like that, I bought Bitcoin down there. And I wish I'd bought more. Everybody wishes they had more Bitcoin. It's what's better than Bitcoin? It's more Bitcoin. You've just got to stack. I mean, and you've got to stack like a smart psychopath. And that means there are certain times when I would not smash a buy button. And, I look at things like I mentioned SOPR. I look at SOPR. I look at MVRV, Z-score, accounting for lost coins. I look at long-term, short-term holders in that category. I look at the market cap. I look at Newpol. And, there are certain times when I will not smash the buy button. And only because I want to get more corn if I'm doing that. But, if you're following this stuff, you just got to stack. I mean, and at some point, once you're committed, once you understand what you have and you're basically in and you hold what you have, then you just got to hang on to it. And you mentioned already yourself, you said about volatility. Yeah, it's a bitch. I mean, I could make a joke and say I'm like 30 years old right now, and this is what happened to me by trading Bitcoin. But the bottom line is there's reality to that. It can age you if you don't understand what you hold. And you'll get shaken out. That's the other thing. I see that in all these cycles. I mean, I've followed these cycles enough to see that people right at the top is as it starts crashing, they're selling at the worst possible moments And, smart money, people that have followed this, they're often down there in those troughs. They're picking up Bitcoin pretty damn cheap. And you want to be that person. And you said, that unit bias thing, that's a good thing to bring up because it's real. I mean, it's really difficult. I had a conversation with someone recently and she just said, I'm too late. I told her it was 100,000. She said, I'm too late. It's over, and I'll never get enough Bitcoin. And that you can't live like that because I don't know when, but I guarantee you, I know that this thing's going to 1 million a coin. And after that, it's going
Is
to
it going to stop? Is it going to stop at 1 million?
No, that's the thing. That's a good point. You know what? I- is Bitcoin better than gold? Absolutely. In every category. I mean, if you look at what is money and you list the characters, about 7 characteristics of money, and it runs circles around gold, and it's going to forever. Gold's dead. Gold is an analog value. If you wanted to trade gold, if you wanted to actually receive gold, you know that you've got to have something called an induced plasma spectrometer in order to chemically make sure that what you're getting is really gold.
Yeah, that's right. Because if not, they can scam you. They do the whole tungsten thing where they put a tungsten bar inside and they wrap it with gold, and you're like, oh, this is gold. And then you wait, you're like, this is gold. But in reality, that's crazy. I didn't think about the verifiability. I think is the
Yeah.
key. Absolutely.
Portable, fungible, durable, divisible, verifiable, scarce, and then if seizure resistant. And just think about what I just said right there. Gold can't handle that. Gold is, it's over. So, gold's market cap's about 18 trillion, right? Actually, it's a little bit higher. So if we overtake gold, it'll be a million a coin. And what's going to stop there? You saw people were including Saylor, were discussing $100 trillion market cap. I believe that's realistic. I do believe that's realistic. And remember, inflows into market cap in purchases of Bitcoin they have a multiple effect. It's probably about 4 to 6, somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe 5 is a good number. Just use 5. So, it's not going to take another, $16 trillion for us to overtake gold. Not at all. It's going to take a lot less, and it's going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable. So, for anybody out there that's struggling right now, and if you feel you're late, don't do the meme coins. Don't do any leverage. Don't, that was our cycle last time, is all those people wiped out in leverage. It was horrible to see. I mean, people lost everything, their whole life savings. Don't do that. Just stack. Start reading.
Stay humble, stack sense.
Stack. Stay humble. And then, don't lose the damn thing. And you are going to be, and, I'll bet your audience, I'll bet you've done demographics. They're probably young. They're younger than I am. So
surprisingly, they are to an extent, but our key demographic, I would say, is between the age of 35 and 45. 35 and 50. That's our key demographic.
You're set.
Yeah.
You're set. I mean, that's great. You know what? You don't
The younger guys don't care. We don't really have a younger audience. It's the 35 to 50-year-old demographic, mostly male.
It's always male.
90-something% male. They're the ones that really only care. Okay, George, this conversation is fascinating me. We're talking about exponentials. You're still early. This thing's going to $1 million. Okay, where I am right now, and where I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I think it's allowed me to essentially kind of understand the political dynamics a lot too, is I think the world is on the verge of a very, very different power dynamic structure in society. So what do I mean by that? I mean, I think that like the nation state model that we live today, the modern nation state, has really been around since like, the Napoleonic era. It's been around for like 200, 250 years. I think we're exiting that era where you have a very all-powerful, big type government. And my logic behind it is a lot of the funding and revenue that type of system requires is not actually coming from direct taxation. It's coming from taxation via monetary debasement. And that's really what's funding the whole system. But once you remove that mechanism away, you inevitably get a much smaller form of government. And of course, the what is the role of the individual in that type of society? And then, of course, with the rise of the internet, it's really allowed people to um, do their own research, consume the information they want to consume, work from anywhere they want to work from, do what we're doing right now, which is, we just met each other on the internet. I found what you were saying interesting. I'm like, dude, let's have a conversation, and then we'll post this worldwide, and then the internet just posted it massively. That didn't exist, 10, 15 years ago. There was a handful of radio stations, there was a handful of TV stations, there was a lot of BS that you had to deal with in order to get on air. Now anyone could just spark up a thing, and I think that's dramatically changed society. You saw them trying to stop this with the censorship and with the deplatforming and whatever. They were not successful. I believe they're going to try the same thing with Bitcoin. I mean, after today, not so much, right? But what I'm trying to say is, like, I think it's going to be a radically different world in 20 years. Government is going to have a radically different role. The individual is going to have a radically different role. The whole idea of employment is going to be different. Things are just going to radically change. The world that we grew up in, right? Like the 90s, the 90s, the 2000s, that type of world, the analog world is gone. It's just completely gone. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. I mean, like, you were a Navy pilot, so you've seen this technological revolution happen step by step. You can even make an argument that you were like kind of at the vanguard of it. The Navy loves the latest, greatest tech, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? It's that toothpaste in you can't put it back into the tube, because these things that are happening, we're not going back. There's going to be resistance. You've seen it already. There's pushback on, remote work, and pushback on some of the privacy issues, and there should be. I mean, but these things aren't going to stop. I mean, we're on a roller coaster now, and the volatility of Bitcoin is going to prepare Bitcoiners for what's coming. I mean, we'll be able to adapt, because Bitcoiners, we're pioneers. We're the kind of people that we were on. We're the kind of people that got on wagon trains and went out west. I mean, we're people that are explorers, and we like to have challenges. Bitcoiners are going to do great. I'm not worried about Bitcoiners. A funny story about technology is, in the F-18, when I was on board the carrier, they were just starting up a program to try and do an automatic landing in an F-18 on a carrier, and that's kind of just makes you a little scary. Just it's a thought that kind of makes you unhappy just thinking about it if you're in the cockpit. And so I would try and use it up at altitude. I'd let the carrier, there was a little guy down there controlling my jet, and I'd let him try to control it up at altitude. That damn thing, I mean, he would just about knock me out in that jet, whipping it all over the place. And I thought, there is no way I'm ever going to let this guy land the jet. So I would be surprised if, there's always, I guess what I'm trying to say is, there's always a human element that seems to be almost like a failure point. And I'm not sure, when I look to the future here and I see AI, I don't know if you're using like Grok a lot or ChatGPT. I'm using it all the time.
I use it all the time. I use it all the time. I use it for work. I use it to respond to emails. I use it for my media company. I use AI tremendously. It's extremely helpful. I would say I would find it weird if someone wasn't using. I like ChatGPT a little bit more than Grok. I know that Elon's been talking about Grok and how it's been getting better and this and that. I still prefer ChatGPT. I feel like ChatGPT has a little bit more of an edge. I know Grok is less political, right? It's more neutral in that sense.
So
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're a Bitcoiner and you're listening right now and you're not using AI, you got to get into it. You got to start doing it. If a guy like me, again, if you look at the screen, you can tell that I'm older. And in fact, a lot of my buddies and stuff, nobody gets Bitcoin. Nobody even really uses these things that we're talking about right now. Bitcoiners are different. We are a different group again. I mean, we set a different standard, and that's great. And you know what? In the future here, we're going to see all of these changes coming, and they're just going to be incredible. And As far as technology, I just embrace it. I just think it could, it could make such a difference for us as a human species. Bitcoin it is a once in a species event. Bitcoin is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind, and we're getting to see it. And it never would have occurred without that technology you're talking about. Even back in like 96, e-gold. E-gold would have worked. I mean, tokenized gold. I mean, that guy actually had a pretty good setup. I can't remember his name, but they passed the Patriot Act and he was declared a money transmitter. That's a pretty bad thing to be called to by the federal government. You need to know at that point it's time to step back because they're going to be coming for you. But these and the reason I'm talking about this is because we're going to see some new products coming down the road, and there's going to be a lot of pushback. There are going to be some Bitcoiners that are pretty pissed off about it, and I'm talking about like banks, tokenized banks. They're coming. I guarantee you. I'm sure you saw the news the other day that I think it was Citibank and one other bank and Bank of New York Mellon's. They're already in the space, and there are more banks coming, and they're going to want that. They're going to want to buy, sell, trade, custody Bitcoin, and they're going to try to make money off of that. And, I'll just say as a caution right now, Bitcoin does not generate yield. Don't forget that. And as we go forward, if you're getting yield somewhere, you better find out where that yield's coming from. Or guess what, buddy? That's you. You can look in the mirror.
You are the yield. I
You are
love
the
that.
yield.
I love that. And also, like, if you're getting, a 40% return on a yearly basis, why the hell do you need yield, right? Like that's I understand. I understand the psychology behind it. But if you actually like use critical thinking, you're like, no, that's a bad idea. But I understand it, a short time preference and all that. Anyways, so George, we are getting to the top of the hour. Really have been enjoying our conversation. The exponential thing is blowing my mind, and really I'm looking forward to this bright orange future that I think we're all heading towards. What would be the last message to the audience, if you had one, everyone who's listening right now? What piece of wisdom would you be able to pass to them?
Well, I tell you something, you got to be tough in life. You got to be hard.
Mm.
I've been through a lot of crap. I'll just tell you right now. And I think what's gotten me through that is I'm a kind of a tough son of a bitch now. I mean, these people have hardened me up, and you got to be. Life is a very difficult journey, and you're going to get knocked down. And the big thing is that when you get in a bad place in life, you just got to keep moving forward. And at the end of your life's journey, something to think about is the fact we're talking a lot about wealth and numbers and everything else, but health is more important than wealth. And at the end of your life, when, the boatman comes for you and you cross the river Styx on your final journey, when you cross that river and you look back, first off, you can look in the boat, you're not taking anything with you. All your sats are left behind. And in that final journey, you look back behind you there, all you're going to see are the people you left behind and things that you did that left a memory on this planet, including some of the greatest things. Sometimes it's just what you said in life to somebody. Just a little word sometimes can make the biggest difference, or sometimes not saying something. And, I think you'll look back over there and you'll see on that other shore, you'll see all the things that you did. And, every day I live my life, I look in that mirror and I say, I'm going to live this day with honor, integrity, strength, and kindness. And at the end of my life, I'm hoping that some of those people back there are going to go, gee, we're going to miss that guy.
I think, they've been through, of course, I doubt I've been through as much shit as you have, but I have been through some interesting things, especially in my late teens, early 20s, and a very difficult time in my life. And after I came out of it, I understood the importance of being a good person. I think part of that is honor, integrity, honesty. Um, and I think that if you live your life with that operating code or that operating system, good things happen to you. Even if you get screwed by someone that lacks integrity, somehow it's just things work out. But you just gotta, continue just being a good person and, doing your best. And I don't know what it is, but it seems like the universe is, designed that way. Now, my question, because you bring up, the final stage of life, right? Do you have faith? Do you believe in something?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I believe in, you can call it God or Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I do believe. I believe that when I cross that river, the river Styx, on the other side, waiting for me will be the people I love and that have been waiting for me. And just like when I look back to the other shore, I'll see the people that I know are going to be coming someday. And I want to be in a position where I'm there to welcome them into this new world. And so, yeah, I have a lot of faith. And sometimes that was really good what you said, because you're right. You get down to the bottom of the pit, and, in a biblical sense, they call it like you're sitting in the ashes. You're out in the desert and you're just sitting in the ashes, and you got to sometimes. It's funny because people want to help you. If you're down and you're maybe struggling, people want to help you, but sometimes you just got to go through it. I mean, you got to suffer, and you'll be a lot stronger on the other side. And
Oh, for sure.
you'll be a hardened Bitcoiner.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, most definitely. And I think people underestimate how much you can put up with as a human being. And if you survive it, if you get through it, you become a tough son of a bitch. I'll say that, right?
That's right.
So this was an absolute pleasure, man. Hope to have you again on soon. Been loving your work that you've been doing, on all you've been doing the podcast circuit, which is really exciting, but love your takes, man. And hope to have you again on the show very soon. Thanks, George.
Oh, you're welcome, buddy. We've got a lot coming forward, but there's going to be a lot of things to talk about. I hope everybody has a great day, and thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it.